Newspaper feature story. This is coverage of a non-news event that captures daily life or stories that bring dignity to the human spirit. This may include sports, and it could be a single page or multiple pages. And keep in mind, this is newspaper print.
There is a project description if you guys would like me to read it. All right. Minnesotans love the state fair, the second largest in the country, and is celebrated with relish a year after the fair was canceled due to the COVID pandemic. Masks, corn, animal rides, and plenty of big smiles brought out many to whom the fair is a sacred tradition.
This is the second project.
The Times photographer Adam, I'm not going to say the name, worked with migrants in Mexico to create a series of self-portraits as they waited to cross the border into the United States.
Third.
This is a pretty lengthy description, but I'll go ahead and read it. The federal eviction moratorium was designed to protect families in economic distress during the pandemic. But in Fresno County, hundreds of California families were losing their homes when photographer blank and reporter blank went to Fresno to document the phenomenon. Almost everyone they met knew someone who had been evicted. They arranged a ride along with the sheriff's department to find a family whose story they could tell. When that didn't materialize, blank asked deputies if they knew of any families that were recently evicted and heard the phrase of a photographer wants to hear. You should have been here yesterday. They told her about a smart little girl, Brianna Valenzuela, who had impressed officers with her mature de-escalation of what could have been the explosive situation with her father. The photographer went to the family's former home, hoping to connect with the Valenzuelas. When they arrived, the family was retrieving its belongings. Witnessing the aftermath and ramifications of an eviction proved far more powerful than anything that happened in the brief encounters during the ride along. The photographer then documented a series of staggering developments that Bree, despite being the only 10-year-old, understood quite well. Bree's mother having a terminal kidney and heart illness, the mother's decision to move to Alabama, where her mother lived. Bree's father refusing to go because he worried that Danetta would die on the road, and then Bree being left to choose between them. Bree told her mother she wasn't leaving. Danetta went without them. 2 days later, she died. In many ways, the house had been the glue that held the family together. In all, the photographer made 10 trips to Fresno. She strived to make images that didn't exploit the family, but accurately depicted their struggle and showed the love that they shared. Bray was the center.
The fourth project.
Project description. Their venues are closed and their stages are dark, but New York City's burlesque performers are itching for the return of feathers, tassels, and harnesses.
Fifth project.
Project description. There was a glorious yet fleeting moment this summer between waves when the COVID case count was at its lowest since the beginning of the pandemic. Before the Delta variant began, heightening anxieties and led to increased calls for a return to wearing masks. The city felt shockingly almost normal. At no time was that more evident than the hours between sunset and sunrise when New York streets became electric. We headed back to our regular haunts in the bustling Pride celebrations. We rediscovered the kind of liberation that comes from losing track of your limbs in a crowd. Over 8 weeks between May and July, the New York Times sent 40 photographers and 9 reporters to all 5 boroughs to document performances, house parties, bars, dance floors, and all the chaos that make New York come alive in the dark. All right, this is the 6th project, and the description is the city's 2.5 million services workers were at the center of the pandemic as it ravaged New York. Some kept the city running, often at risk to their own lives. Others found themselves unemployed indefinitely in one of the most expensive cities in the country. And this is the 7th project. Growing at unprecedented rates and shaped by forces both familiar and new, dozens of African cities will join the ranks of humanity's biggest megapolises between now and 2100. In Lagos, Khartoum, Kanasha, Mombasa, and Abidjan, we examine common themes: migration, inequality, foreign investment, conflict, and planning that underlie this transformation across the continent. And the rest of the caption is just credits. Okay, this is the 8th project, and the description is: what was once a cluster of key offices and compounds has evolved into a 21st century fortress encircled by blast walls, checkpoints, and security cameras, creating what for many is an impenetrable urban void known as the Green Zone. And the rest of the caption is just credits. Okay, 8th project. A photo essay by photographer documenting the pandemic's toll on New York City's economy and way of life as it was laid bare on its streets. The essay was also featured in a 40-page special tabloid print section of the Sunday Times through a collaborative effort with myself, the photo editor, and the photographer. He spent about a 10-month effort to photograph how the coronavirus had ruptured New York City's economy and way of life. This was a continuation of a project we had started in 2020 when the pandemic started, and this was the final project. The photographer traversed the city on foot walking or running through boroughs. As the virus evolved, New York's vulnerabilities and inequalities became more pronounced. Amid the despair, the photographer found moments of hope and quiet calm. By early 2021, the photographer had captured tens of thousands of black and white pictures, the starkness of the city's landscapes filling each frame. The resulting photo essay started as a requiem for the city we knew before the pandemic and evolved into a love letter to the New Yorkers who never gave up. Photographer and I worked tirelessly on edits and scenes to capture, reaching out to locations and contacts around the city seeking permission to photograph, risking his life during the dangerous virus, all whilst following COVID safety rules. Because the story stretched to most aspects of New York life, the photographer needed access to a wide range of people, locations, and settings, including intensive care units, private homes, and offices that were all locked down under strict orders. The photographer worked with medical staff and authorities on the virus to ensure the safety of others, and he got regular COVID tests. This photo essay required capturing intimate portraits of people and candid moments of interaction. We spent many months on our final edit and print layout with the designers and colleagues. Okay, 10th project. Project description: 10 photographers across the US document America through the self-expression and dress. Eleventh project. Project description: what does love look like in a time of hate? Asian and Asian American photographers respond. All right, 12th and final project. We have another lengthy description, so here we go. Certain moments in life have the power to shift our core sense of being. The death of a parent, the birth of a child, an incurable disease diagnosis, the coronavirus pandemic and all it has wrought is such a moment. Everyone knows someone who got sick or died or lost her or his job. Everyone has a personal before and after. It has been a collective near-death experience for those lucky enough to survive. People have found themselves close to life's deepest questions, those forced by an apocalypse. Questions about how we live, how we suffer, and how we make meaning of our short time here on this earth. Who am I? Who are you? Who are we becoming? How have we been transformed? Through it all, the world has not stopped. The killing of George Floyd, the Capitol siege, more mass shootings. For some, facing trauma feels too hard. Others have found unexpected resilience and courage. Courageous stillness, transformation was forced on some, and for others, it was chosen. For many, the suffering of this past year has birthed an awakening. The questions of how we have changed will be with us in the months and years ahead. The process of reflection is just beginning. Where it takes us remains to be seen, but the clarity that comes with the intense suffering often clouds as time moves on. We have a window now to look at our lives anew. This is the story of how America is beginning that journey in her own words.
Awesome. Thanks so much for reading all those descriptions too. How do we feel about doing a round of ins and outs?
Yep.
Do people feel ready for that?
This is an out for me.
Out for me too.
Out.
Okay,
In for
In.
me.
in,
Yeah. In for me.
in,
In. Out.
out for me,
I'll go in for now.
I'll also say in. In.
out for me,
I'm out too.
In.
I'm out
Out.
on this.
Out.
Yeah. Out.
Out.
out, out,
Also
Out.
out. In.
in. I like it when we say it at the same time.
I know.
In.
Feeling efficient about today. I'm feeling good about today's efficiency.
Out.
I'm out.
Out,
In.
out,
I'm out. on
Out.
this.
Out.
In.
Out.
out.
I think I'm hearing right, and so are Julian and Lizzie. Let us know if we missed anything.
Oh,
Wow.
look at that.
Nice work. Reminder, we still only have 4 placements for second, third, honorable mention, and each one can only have 1, and we can't skip any. Can clarify more later if need be. So let's start with this one. Yeah, what stood out to you all?
First of all, have we ever seen this concept executed? Because I haven't, but I also, yeah, I mean, part of what I love about this is just conceptually, I think it's a great tool for telling a story, but I don't know if that's happened before, and I'm just don't remember.
I remember seeing this specific story and being really
Yeah.
blown away with it. I don't think that I've seen this tool of collaboration used in a major newspaper like this, but I don't know, at least at school. I remember when I was taking view camera, quite a few people decided to do collaborative portraits with folks. They're just so beautiful. I'm such a
I
sucker
agree.
for large format portraits.
Yeah. But I agree, it's the concept and the execution. I think both are just beautiful. And I do think that idea has been done where photographers have been collaborating with people who actually, press the button to take their own portrait, but I can't remember any specific examples. But this, especially in this setting, approaching people who are so vulnerable, I just think it's a wonderful project, beginning to end. But
I also really love the layout of these images a ton. And I think too, just like it's really refreshing to see this sort of collaboration between photographer and sitter that allows the sitter to have not only a say in the image, but like a sense of autonomy, which I think is probably really important when we're talking about people who are so vulnerable because of the situation that they're in.
right.
And I really love the posing. I don't know how much input the sitters had, but every portrait feels unique to the person holding the trigger. And I think that's really what stands out to me.
Also, I thought in terms of the editing itself, I thought it was just so smart. They basically had the larger images have the more naturalistic backgrounds that are more textured and detailed. And a lot of the smaller portraits have either backdrops or just very simple kind of backgrounds. And I thought that made sense. And there was good pacing in terms of, alternating groups and single people and in the ages, and just the distribution I thought worked. And just that opener is just so touching and so beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, that opener
That's a
Yeah.
really bold way to start a story. Like,
Yeah.
I love that opener.
Yeah, me too.
I think it does what a good edit does. It like entices you to look at the next photo. Like it's the sequence. It kicks it off on the right foot.
Hmm.
I mean, it could have
Yeah.
been a beautiful ender too, but I love it as an opener.
Yeah.
So.
So good.
Great. Why don't we move on to chat about the next one and definitely keep this in, sounds like in contention for
I really enjoy what this essay is trying to do. I do find myself on second look wanting to go a little deeper with it. I feel like it needs just, there feels like there's something missing to me now that I'm looking at it again. I'm kind of getting the sense that I'm seeing the same image repeatedly.
Yeah, I felt the same way when I was looking at this last night, and I'm still having a hard time articulating for myself what exactly is missing in this for me.
Yeah.
Because I actually do really like the layout. I like the way the images are placed. But I think to echo Shaminder, I also it kind of feels like I'm seeing the same thing in every frame.
Yeah, I mean, I think partially that's because we're looking at them small. Like if this was
Yeah.
larger, we would be spending more time with each image and we would be seeing them more or less one by one, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like this is much, look how small that is. And
Yeah, I think you might be right. That is a
so,
big
I
part
mean,
of
my
it.
first thought was like, oh, this is one of those stories that probably is a great digital story and then gets kind of shoehorned into a layout,
Hmm.
you know, where you're able to give
Yeah.
each image
It's a ton
time,
of
but
copy as
if it's
well.
late, it's a lot of copy.
It's, I feel like it needed more pages to really help it breathe a little more.
I think also what I'm seeing too is like if I didn't know that this was in a story about eviction, it could kind of go anywhere.
Mm.
Like there are scenes of the home,
Mhm.
but it doesn't feel rooted in a home. And I don't know, maybe that was the photographer's intention because we are talking about eviction. There's something lost in translation for me.
I just like the emotion in a lot of the images, but I do agree that there's some repetition. And I also, it'll be interesting to see if it comes in, because I haven't had a chance to look beyond like one or two categories, if it does come up as a digital story, if they added more images or if it feels more expansive, because it does feel like it's been sort of consolidated, I mean, sort of cramped, a little bit.
Mhm.
But it's true, I think, Emily, what you said, that if you look at each image individually, I think they're really strong just in terms of the way that the light and the visual kind of brings in the emotion, I think. But I was thinking last night when I looked at this category, this felt like maybe a third or an honorable mention. It didn't have the impact as one or two of the other stories for me, but and I admire the commitment to the photographer too, knowing, that I've forgotten him, so he or she, spent a lot of time with the family.
You know what's also interesting looking at it and how we're looking at it right now, like the focal lengths are all very similar. And the placement of the people within the frames
right.
very
That's
similar.
where you're starting to feel that
Right.
repetition.
Exactly.
And had they, if I was editing this, terrible thing to think or say out loud. But what would be helpful, I think, here would be if some of those images were without people or were close up or had some sort of movement to them so that you weren't getting that feeling of a repeating story. Because I think that there's actually, if the concept of each image does have some movement and some change, but the structure is what's making it feel a little muddy.
I think it's also the layout. It's emphasizing how similar things are just from how it's laid out.
I mean, I kind of like this layout, frankly, because I'm like, it's not trying to be creative. No, it's like this is easy to read, but it's not giving that movement.
Yeah, but it's true. Variation in scale would have really helped a lot. So
Right? I think that would have helped.
it's true.
Great. Okay, let's move on to the next one.
I really love these portraits, but I did kind of say to myself, how is this different, or how, does it kind of stand out, or how important is it even? There's so many workers who were out of their occupation, thrown out of their occupations, but I do think they're beautiful portraits.
This was we saw this yesterday too, for the front section.
Right.
We went quite lengthy. We talked about that front, and I loved it yesterday. I still like this a lot. I just don't think it beats some of the other stuff in this category.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It wasn't one of the top two for me anyway, but
my problem with it is that they shot burlesque in the way that you shoot burlesque.
wait, I'm sorry, Emily, say that again.
Well, they shot a burlesque story in a way with lighting and with an aesthetic that is the burlesque lighting and aesthetic. So I feel like I've seen these images before.
What's also interesting is the section front has this very painterly quality to it, and I mean, it looks like a Hopper painting, and then the rest of the sequence doesn't have that same essence for me. Anyway, like the front has a very different feeling than the rest of the edit.
I guess I kind of disagree with both of you a little bit, and I'm not arguing for it, to displace some of the other stories we've been talking about, but I feel like I don't think it's a bad thing to be photographed in the aesthetic of the discipline in which they're working. Although, point taken about if you think you've seen, it's too familiar, but I don't feel like the rest of the images are that out of key with the first. They seem in the same vein, kind of in the same vibe to me.
I think what I'm getting at is the first image feels like I get a personality. I see a person. And I think the rest of them, I see a performance, a character, something that's put upon. And I'm really finding myself wishing that the entire edit was a lot like that first image, that tried to do something different, that tried to, take away all of the expected of burlesque and like show me a person.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's what I was trying to articulate, is that there's some here that just feel a bit cliched, and that's partially because of the photographic choices. And I mean, like the placement of the person, for example, I'm looking at the woman in red in the backstage image with the hair Next slide. That one on the left, top left. It feels like this could be on the program for the show. Anyway.
Is anyone advocating for this to stay in the top 4?
I mean, I could see it as an honorable mention, or, but
Okay.
we can see what else is.
Yeah.
And I know, Oriana, you haven't really spoken about this. But
Ariana, you're muted.
I'm gonna say no, because I looked at pretty much everything last night, and this comes up in a couple other categories that I think it might be a better fit for.
Oh, well, that's a good point.
As do a lot of these stories we're looking at here. So I think
Actually,
everyone's
this-
gonna get their moment to shine.
This might be a good reminder for me that this is the feature category, right?
Yep.
Correct. Newspaper, print, feature. Back to this project.
Seeing this project in context actually really made me like the cover a lot more than I had.
I really like this one. I just think it does what a newspaper is supposed to do. Like, it captures this moment. It tells me something about my city, and the edit is really tight
It is.
and varied. And like, I know from 10 feet away, you might think it's just a bunch of nightlife photos, but when you lean in a little bit, start exploring every frame, they're all telling a story, and they're all different shades of, the same story, but collectively you get a bigger understanding of what is this moment? What was everybody waiting for? Why did it explode the way it did?
Could you do this large and let me see that again? Because to me, this just looks like party photos.
I thought the same thing initially, but then when you put it in context of the fact that this was that very small window in time, that I'm not going to say I thought COVID was over, but that we thought COVID was over, and that we recognized that we could be in communion with one another again. Then they're not just nightlife photos. And they are a really important historical document, considering the fact that we were all locked up and couldn't be around each other and couldn't touch one another for months on end.
I mean, it's like, it's not just nightlife photos. It's something about our humanity. Why did we need this? And these photos are telling me what we were missing and why did it explode like this? Like, everybody was feeling it.
I still absolutely love the cover image, and I thought it really, meshed really well with the headline. I felt a little bit disappointed when I saw the rest of the story, that I just felt a little bit like there were too many images, and they just seem, kind of piled all together. And I get it that, you kind of want that sense of excess. But just visually, I wouldn't have minded if there had been, I love the fact that it ended with that dawn picture. That I thought was really wonderful, sort of change of pace. But I wouldn't have minded if there were one or two other images that just weren't so similar, just in terms of being crammed with bodies. And again, I know you're trying to convey that, but I also couldn't help thinking that I couldn't help comparing it to that other package that the New York Times did about the city coming alive again, which had way more kind of variation, because it wasn't just about nightlife, and so I think in my mind this suffered a little by comparison. But anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I still, I feel like this could have been one large image, and with a headline. I feel like all of the people are the same age. I feel like they're more or less in the same kind of location, except for the person wearing the cowboy hat. to me, this is like, I don't know. That's all.
I mean, it's almost as if, you ask yourself, do they want to create the effect through repetition? Because if they didn't do that intentionally, then I'm not sure it succeeds. But
I mean, is there like a picture of like the nightclub after everyone's left and their masks on the floor?
right, exactly.
Is there a picture
exactly,
of two
something
people
different.
just going at it real close up, just kissing each other so hard? I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, is there something that's giving me something that's even pushing us into that moment? Like, I really don't even, if I saw this without a headline, I'd be like, is this 1995? Is this 2000? Is this, like, I have no sense that this is a release from COVID. Are these like, and even the text, I don't think is giving me like any sense that, anyway, but
Good
I
point.
could, yeah, those are my concerns with it.
I
I also feel like
uh-huh.
as nightlife images, I've seen these nightlife images so many times.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
if
I
you're
really
gonna do
like these
nightlife,
images.
just
Yeah.
like give me something that could have been at Ibiza.
I mean, I really do like many of these images. I just thought so many of them were so similar. Was it really necessary to include all of them and not include, as you said, Emily, ones that were very different in terms of like the close-up of the couple kissing or whatever, but I also had the sense, and this is not a bad thing, it's probably a very savvy thing, that they had commissioned this story and they were going to do this sort of outburst of, people coming together and this riotous kind of celebration of coming out of a pandemic. And then, Delta hit and they said, oh my God, we've got to get this in the paper. And then they added that headline about, is the euphoric summer over? And then they published it right away. I mean, that's, and I thought, well, if they did, that was very smart because they didn't want to throw away the whole project. They just want to, and that's why they opened with this image that was more slightly melancholy, like, is the party over, kind of, but that was kind of my sense when I saw the whole story.
Oh, that's good. That's
well,
good.
it made me wonder,
CSI, yeah.
But anyway, so
It's
so I like it.
adaptability.
Well, I like it a lot, this story, but I just felt like in terms of the editing, is it really as deserving as some of the other things that we've been looking at? That's all.
Right. Yeah, this feels like it's probably going to fall into maybe honorable mention territory, but I definitely have to say, as much as I like it, like there are a couple of other projects coming up that I'm just nuts for.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, so why don't we move on to the next one, discussing the next one then, and we can start to rank. And
Yes.
This is fabulous.
This one. Oh my God. Oh my God.
Yes, I totally love this. And I'd kind of heard about it, but I never actually saw it, the Ashley Goodwinson thing, but I think it's fantastic.
Really obsessed with the layout on this and the way the images are juxtaposed.
Yeah, the pacing is like dynamo.
Yeah, pacing
good.
is great. Yeah, I totally agree.
It's like a throwback. I just feel like we never get to slow down like this.
say more about all this if you all can, in terms of pacing, layout.
For
Well, I
me,
think-
it's sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
Yeah, for me, it's the layout forces me as a viewer to take my time with these images, which I feel is something that is really difficult to balance in news, right? Because it's like, here's the information, here's the image that illustrates the information. But I think to take this sort of photo book approach in a newspaper about a really significant historic moment in New York that shows multiple viewpoints of what it was like to watch the city fall apart during a pandemic was just really, really brilliant, especially considering the fact that it has been really, really tough to get the American populace to kind of sit with the reality of what this pandemic has wrought on us. And I feel like the editing in this piece really forces you to sit with all of the super uncomfortable, unfortunate parts of the pandemic, while also kind of shining a light on the hopeful parts of it without it being like too syrupy, if that makes any sense.
Mhm. Yeah, I'll agree with that. I think also that the hidden side of photo editing is trying to advocate for this kind of presentation in a
For
newspaper
space.
is
Yeah.
insane, right? Like
Yeah.
but it's like a square format, special pullout, and you got all this white space and
Mhm.
no advertising or no copy anywhere other than the beginning. And it's like
Isn't
you
that
have to
remarkable?
really fight for that.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, to have a sequence that is paying off every page.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a real silence in this edit, which I think is a really smart analog to the moment
Mhm.
when the city was pretty silent. It's giving images room to breathe. And these are complicated images that need that space and that silence around them in order to hit properly. And I
Mhm.
think it's really interesting what you said about there's no copy, that the images are so strong that you don't need much to contextualize them. And the images are using each other to contextualize the moment, which you see with those really strong and smart diptychs.
Yep.
And there's
It's just remarkable.
there's like this somberness, like this respect given to the work as well. Like the
Yes.
people that have given their time and allowed you to come in at a time that, I mean, like we know it was risky, right? People had to trust you enough to say you can come into my home, and there needs to be a respect of that trust as well.
Mhm.
So I just think it pays off on all cylinders. Like, this is amazing and very rare.
Yeah, I know. I think it also shows that, the photographer was working on this for a long time, I think. And I just love that opener. It kind of says it all, right? That really ominous plume of steam, that just cuts across the frame kind of diagonally. And that, woman with her child looking so sort of forlorn and abandoned in the corner. Just sort of a proxy, for all of us watching something ominous coming toward us, not knowing. I just thought, again, in terms of layout, just there was variation and yet enough repetition to show that it was deliberate. It wasn't disorganized, I don't know. I was really struck by this, and so many different kinds of situations that really showed different examples of how people's lives were disrupted, whether it was, through their jobs or their families, or, the couple where the father just has his head down on the table and the mother's trying to juggle, two kids while she's looking for something on the bookshelf. I don't know. And the juxtapositions, as you said, Oriana, I mean,
Yeah,
just
the breadth and the depth of this is, I think, really what's most astounding to me.
yeah.
And then also too, like, I don't know, like I'm looking at the set of images and I feel like I'm looking at images that are going to visually define what this particular moment in time was.
Right.
And that, having seen so many pandemic pictures that have like tried to attempt that, and to see it so brilliantly executed here, just it feels really special.
I mean, just go back a couple of them with the one with the sheet.
Oh,
It's like what an act break. What a tonal shift that you just made
Right.
one spread.
Right.
And it completely takes this sharp right turn in how you feel about what you're seeing and your expectation about what you're about to see next.
yeah. And also
Yeah.
just like that really smart allusion to death.
Right. It's so
People being in the
elegiac.
ICU,
Right.
without
Right.
having to show you that.
Exactly.
This is just really, really, really smart photography, really smart editing.
Yeah. And substantive, so substantive, because it sort of does all the reporting. And I would imagine the picture editor, was very involved with that too, you know, in terms
Mhm.
of access and trying to figure out, you know, what are the key points we have to make, but they don't look like point pictures, you know, they're memorable images that convey mood and emotion too.
Yeah,
So, yeah, this is really standout, I thought.
it is.
Even that headline, "City Ruptured," paired with that photo.
Mm-hmm,
Oh, what an
right.
understated but
Yeah.
perfect headline.
Mm-hmm.
So good.
Great. Why don't we go back to our contact sheet of projects? Is there a clear top project to all of you? Sorry.
I think
Me.
that was
So.
it, right?
Yeah.
I think so.
Great. Got that.
I would put the self-portrait second.
Yeah, I
Agreed.
agree.
Yeah, I would too. I would too.
Yep.
I think here's where it's going to get trickier.
Yeah.
Yes.
After that, I'm just not as wedded to any. Those were the two that really jumped out at me. I kind of last night gave a little star next to and said those are the two for me, you know.
Yeah.
But so after that, I do like all of the other three projects. I don't really have a strong sense of which, you know, would come one before the other. But I guess for me, the nightlife one would be maybe slightly less, maybe than. But I mean, they all have sort of their pros and cons. But
Yeah, I feel like I want to give the nightlife one third place again, just like primarily off of the fact that it's a historic document. But then when I'm
I-
thinking about these three stories, I don't know. It's like you said, like they all have some issues.
Mhm. But if
Mhm.
you're thinking of it in terms of historic documents, is people being out of work not more important? People being evicted from their homes not more important?
Right. But I
You
mean,
know? So I mean,
No.
if you look at it only from the issue point,
I
of
And
think
that,
I'm
like,
between those
that's the
two, the ones you
difficulty in
guys just
that.
mentioned.
I'm sorry, what
And
was that, Shaminder?
I said I think I think I'm between the nightlife and the eviction story, and I kind of want to see that eviction story again.
Yeah.
For number 3,
Yeah.
for me, it's an obvious. This eviction story just seems, even just the amount of work, the amount of work that was put in by the photographer and the photographer's team at the newspaper.
Mhm.
It's just a harder lift than sending people out to a bunch of nightclubs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially when the images that we returned were just standard nightclub images,
That's a
even if
good
they were
point.
beautiful.
Yep.
This
Yeah.
is just like this is actual storytelling in a way than documentation of parties.
It's a really, really good point.
I think it is. I'm convinced by what you say. I think it is more storytelling than either of the other two
Mhm.
we're considering.
Yeah.
I still love those burlesque portraits too, but
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
think-
I like the burlesque portraits more than the
The
nightlife.
knife. Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
I
I'm
don't
gonna
know.
nominate Evicted for third then.
Okay.
I second that nomination.
I agree too. I think that's a good, for the reasons that we've all been talking about. I think it's a good call.
And I'm not biased because I'm in the Bay Area. Just
No, I think it's really important to point out like the heavy lift of working on a story of that nature, and that it is rooted in storytelling, and it is a very different kind of work than showing up at a nightclub and making pictures of people partying. I think that's a super important point
And
to
a
make.
long-term commitment too. I think,
Exactly.
on the part of the paper too, which I feel like should be rewarded. So.
So do we have honorable mentions?
You all have one to give.
We have one.
So
I want to give my honorable mention to the burlesque story. That's my vote.
I'm gonna go with nightclub.
I go with burlesque over nightclub.
Yeah. I knew that was going to happen,
Yeah.
but I still had to say it. I have to vote with my convictions.
Yeah, I'd be happy with the burlesque as I would love to see that get an honorable mention.
Yeah.
But
All right. Trucking through the
Good
first.
job, team.
Yeah.